this occasion of the announcement. We do apologize for starting a little bit late. We were here on time, but for some logistical issues, we had to delay just a little bit. I'm here, or rather my name is Siya Koza, and my role is to just facilitate the engagements between you and the leadership that you see at the front. I'm the spokesperson to the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, who is leading this media briefing. On his left is the Deputy Minister of Home Affairs, and on his right, it's the Commissioner of the Border Management Authority. Next to the Commissioner, the Deputy Minister is Mr. Njabulo Nzuza. The Commissioner is Dr. Mike Masiapato, and from SARS we've got Mr. Jean Ravele, and at the far end it's Mr. Nel Chrobla from Ernst Young, and to my immediate right we've got Ms. Gillian Wilson from National Treasury, and I just forgot the name from Bowmans. Mandis. Okay, and we've got Wandisile from Bowmans Gilfilan. And then we also have the Director General of the Department who's sitting here, and other colleagues from the Development Bank of Southern Africa. So all of your questions will be answered between everyone who is here. Without further ado, I would like to invite the Minister to proceed with the meeting. Thank you.
This thing never used to be new. Yeah. Why is it here today? I'm seeing it for the first time. Oh, commissioners, it's you guys. What are guys? They brought something new to the press conference, yes. Yeah. Can I start here? No, don't worry. You can leave it. My colleague, the Deputy Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Njabulo Nzuza, Commissioner of the Border Management Authority, Dr. Mike Masiapata, and your team, the Director General of the Department of Home Affairs, Mr. Tommy Makode, and your team, Ms. Gillian Wilson from the National Treasury, our transaction advisor team led by Mr. Tabantladi from the Presidency's Infrastructure South Africa, Mr. Jean Ravele from SARS, Mr. Tipiso Moedi from Tsipiri, from Moedi, from the Development Bank of Southern Africa Infrastructure Fund, Mr. Wandizile Madlana from Bowmans Gilfilan, our legal team, Mr. Neil Chrobla from Ernst Young, our auditors, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you very much for honoring us with your presence on this very important day as we take another step towards the advancement of our border management. We are incrementally managing our borders as a country. As you know, in July 2022, we launched the border guards of the Border Management Authority. We are here today to add another layer in the country's efforts to make our borders safer, less porous, and more importantly, very efficient in facilitating and easing of trade, as well as the legitimate movement of people. When I delivered my budget speech in May this year, on the 17th, I announced my gratitude at the approval granted by the Finance Minister, Mr. Enoch Godongwana, for the Department of Home Affairs and the Border Management Authority to issue requests for proposals to the market for the redesigning and redevelopment of our top 6 busiest land port of entry. If there is one thing you need to take away from this briefing as the media, it is that the South African government is committed to put the latest infrastructure and relevant technology in its effort to modernize and upgrade our ports to be on par with the current global best practices on border management. To this end, the main objective is to make it easier for law-abiding people and companies to easily enter and exit South Africa through our borders, while the illicit movement of persons and goods is nipped in the bud, and pun is intended. It has taken a while for us to get to this point, but I would like to commend my team consisting of officials from the Border Management Authority, the Department of Home Affairs, the Presidency Infrastructure South Africa, National Treasury, South African Revenue Services, the Development Bank of South Africa's Infrastructure Fund, and transactional advisors Bowmans, Gilfillan, and Ernst Young for their hard work in getting us to this point. And that's why we have called you to brief you. In fact, South Africa's ports of entry were designed during the apartheid era with the primary objective of tightening security whilst neglecting the effective facilitation of regional and international trade. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not an over-exaggeration to state that when you visit our land ports of entry between us, South Africa, and our SADC neighbors, the South African side of the border looks like an informal settlement, while the other side looks like Sandton. It's not an exaggeration. Those who have been at our borders will attest to this. Since the advent of democracy, there's been an exponential increase in the number of people moving between South Africa and the countries in the region. The volumes of regional and international trade has similarly increased. As a result, our land ports of entry are very congested, and that continues to stifle trade instead of enabling it. If you understand what I'm talking about, just take a visit to Lebombo border post between South Africa and Mozambique, where you will see trucks lining up for kilometers, bumper to bumper, for hours on end on the N4 corridor. This is because mining companies in Northwest, Limpopo, and Mpumalanga took a decision to use Maputo port for their exports and no longer Richards Bay Harbor. Given our current narrow design of the port, this has led to congestion. The announcement we are making today will make sure that what is happening now will become history. I wish to remind you that South Africa has 72 ports of entry, of which 53 are land ports of entry, 11 are international airports, and 8 are seaports, all of which are now operated by the Border Management Authority, led by Dr. Masiapat. Of the 53 land ports of entry, we have now earmarked 6 of our largest and busiest by traffic volume for redevelopment in order to address the congestion. The outcome of the redevelopment of these ports of entry will be used as a blueprint in the long term for all other South Africa's land ports of entry. The primary intention is to ensure the realization of regional economic integration in the SADC region, while facilitating the realization of African continental free trade area. The 6 earmarked ports of entry are: 1, Beit Bridge between South Africa and Zimbabwe; 2, Lebombo between Mozambique and South Africa; 3, Maseru Bridge between Lesotho and South Africa; 4, Fixback between Lesotho and South Africa; 5, Kopfontein between South Africa and Botswana; and 6, Oshoek between South Africa and Eswatini. The redevelopment of the ports will result in: 1, the efficient cross-border management of movement of people, goods, and services; 2, the improved administration of persons entering and leaving the Republic; 3, better regional economic integration and enhanced support for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area; 4, improved revenue collection and addressing leakages caused by the illegal movement of goods and illicit financial flows; 5, protecting local industry from harmful imports and exports; and 6, effective migration management, including capping illegal migration. The 6 ports of entry project will cover the full infrastructure development of each designated port of entry and the provision of required services to ensure a coherent and coordinated support of the institutional functions of all organs of state present in the port of entry, in order to ensure that the ongoing operations at each of the designated ports of entry are not interrupted. Construction will be undertaken in phases. During the construction, the project is expected to create in the order of 38,000 jobs in areas around the 6 designated ports of entry. The project is being undertaken on a public-private partnership, a PPP. The procurement process is therefore subject to the procedures set out in Treasury Regulation 16 for initiating, procuring, and concluding PPP projects. Treasury Regulation 16 specifically requests that a PPP project must be demonstrably affordable, result in value for money for government, and substantial technical, operation, and financial risks are transferred to the private sector contracting party. 4 national treasury approvals are prescribed by Treasury Regulation 16, 2 of which have so far been obtained by the project, allowing the Department of Home Affairs and the Border Management Authority to publish the request for proposals. The request for proposals, or commonly known as RFPs, for the 6 ports of entry projects were issued on Sunday, the 3rd of September 2023, that is 3 days ago, inviting interested parties to participate. The RFP is on the e-tender portal and other government websites, including the Department of Home Affairs website. The adverts were also placed in Sunday newspapers as I said, on the 3rd of September 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, the call for requests for proposals is essentially looking for a partnership between the state and the private sector to inject cutting-edge infrastructure and technology in our ports. On the 5th of December 2020, the country saw a truck arriving at Lebombo border post between us and Mozambique, full of brooms to the brim, purporting to be transporting those brooms to Mozambique. When the brooms were removed, as part of the inspection process, a brand new Ford Ranger was discovered on the bed of the truck. On further investigation, it was uncovered that the car was stolen in Sandton on the 30th of November 2020. This type of incidents may keep on happening on a regular basis because our method of managing movement of trucks through our borders is via sampling whereby trucks are selected on the basis of a risk profile. This means that some trucks carrying illicit goods such as cigarettes, liquor, or even trafficked people can escape undetected. In our request for proposals, we are expecting the prospective partner company to come install latest technology such as gamma rays scanners, such that each truck can drive through them. Gamma ray technology can pick up anything from illicit cigarettes to liquor to paper money and human beings. Some ports in other jurisdictions are still using X-ray technology, which we regard as outdated. So, ladies and gentlemen, officials will unpack the request for proposals to bidders on the 27th of September 2020, followed by visits to the identified ports of entry. For now, I wish to end by inviting our private sector partners and government partners and partners in the parastatals for each of them to outline their role in this project. And I'm sure they've been introduced to you. There won't be any damage in them introducing themselves again and telling you exactly what they are here for and what is that which they are going to do in the project. Let's start at the end there. I think you must come here to complete the job. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Nel Grobbelaar. I'm an associate partner in Ernst Young, Johannesburg, South Africa, leading the transaction advisory team. From a PPP perspective, indeed encouraged by the progress, also echoing the words of the Minister this morning that we are inviting the private sector to participate. We've adopted an interface that we encourage interactions with the private sector. The procurement platform is activated. We've already seen activity in that platform, and really on behalf of the transaction advisory team, also mentioning Knight Peacehold and Bowman Gilfillan, all the success for the procurement phase of this project leading into financial year 2024. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Jim. Good morning. I didn't realize I was told until at this point. My name is Jean Ravele. I'm from the South African Revenue Service. Our role in the project is that we are one of the two main stakeholders at these borders, together with the BMA, and we are responsible for facilitating trade, movement of cargo across the borders. So that's why I'm here and part of this team. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Mike Masia Pato, the Commissioner for the Border Management Authority. So our role is to receive when they have done the work. So effectively what that means is as the P partner, would effectively come to the ground and do the redesigning, the redevelopment. We had to give the specifications of our requirements as the Border Management Authority, and of course together with the other colleagues like the Revenue Authority or Services, as Jean had indicated. And of course we are then to be using the infrastructure ourselves once it is actually developed, and to that extent we should then be able to make sure that we facilitate better the movement of persons and goods in and out of the Republic. Thanks.
I am shorter, so I'll pull down the mic. I am Wandisile Mandlana, a partner at Bowmans and Ernst Young, part of the transaction advisor. I am in particular focused in public law, but we've got other team of lawyers who are project finance lawyers. Thereby then our role in this overall project is to ensure that the project is bankable from a legal perspective and does deliver value for money to the country, and that it's procured in a manner that is transparent, competitive, cost efficient, fair and equitable. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Gillian Wilson from the National Treasury. Our task is basically to take the project through the different phases of PFMA approval and to ensure the project comply to the different regulations in the PFMA, and also to assist the department in developing an appropriate payment mechanism for the project. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chipiri Moedi, and I'm representing the Development Bank of Southern Africa, as well as DBSA, as well as the Infrastructure Fund. I think we've played multiple roles in the project. One of the initial roles that we played was to provide project preparation funding for the project to get it to where you see it being presented to the media today. We're also supporting the project sponsor DHA and BMA in terms of project management. We're also assisted them in getting the RFP approved from a financing perspective for P. And additionally, we'll also look at ensuring that the project essentially is bankable from a financing perspective. And if there is any refinancing required, we'll also be assisting the sponsors from that perspective. Thank you so much.
Infrastructure SA. Oh, by the way, do we leave anybody?
All right.
Yes, that is everyone then. We would, we're at that stage where we are taking in questions. I would invite you to raise your questions. Please indicate the publication or the organization you represent, and also the person to which you are directing your questions to. Thank you. Can I see by indication of hands if who wants to ask the first question? Okay, I see Katleho. You may go ahead.
All right, good morning. My name is Katleho from the SABC. I just wanted to find out about, in terms of the timelines for the project, when are you looking at just getting this process underway? And would we then see, disruptions, anticipating any disruptions to come through from this project that will get underway, looking at the fact that these are the 6 busiest ports of entries where then business and trade is concerned? And also, just maybe to the Development Bank of South Africa to say, looking at ensuring that the project is bankable, what did you look into when the Home Affairs Department approached you? And project preparation funding, can you just expand on that? That we have figures in terms of maybe what you had anticipated for the project to cost.
All right, thanks. I take it that the first 2 questions are to the Minister?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the other one are to the transaction advisors?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Do you have other questions? Peter?
Thank you so much. I'm not sure whether the panel can hear me, but how much will the redevelopment cost? And
I didn't hear where you come from.
Kaya FM.
Okay.
Peter from Kaifa, Minister.
Okay.
Yes. The second question will be,
How much?
yes. The second question will be, when the projects are undergoing, are there possibilities that they might affect the ongoing processes at the borders? For example, sometimes we hear that, especially during December, that borders are under pressure. Ports of entry are receiving, so many travelers and like. So now, once we implement this project, Minister, have we looked at that as to how are we going to avoid that they add pressure on the movement of goods and people between all these countries? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like just to check with Takalani if we've got any questions on the online platform.
Thank you, Sia. We do have a few questions from online.
How many?
I think there are 4.
Okay, perhaps let's start by allowing the panel to respond on the first group and then we come to the online questions. Thank you. All right.
Yes, I'm not going to answer the questions alone. The first one on the timelines for the project. Unfortunately, the timetable has been drawn. I don't have a copy here. I don't know whether. Yes, come and help, please. My copy is in the office.
To confirm on the timeline as per the RFP issued, we anticipate the bidders to respond by the 4th of March 2024. This will be followed by an adjudication process, ultimately seeking to conclude the PPP agreement and the related agreements in support of commercial close, and then ultimately financial close, tentatively at this juncture, Q4 2024. Financial close then, of course, would allow the private party to start with its construction works, and therefore, depending on the border post that will be constructed, a construction period to follow prior to the commencement of services once the works have been completed. So, indeed, from a financial close perspective, to reiterate, Q4 2024 as the commencement then of construction works following financial close. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The issue of disruptions of services I've already answered in my speech is going to be in phases. In other words, one part of the port will be busy. If you look at the design, for instance, the design is such that we're going to have one lane for trucks only and nothing else, which doesn't disturb all the other activities. Now, there are trucks passing through the border, so when you construct a new lane for them, you don't disturb what they are doing until that line is finalized. Then there will be another line for private cars and taxis, then pedestrians. So they will be built in phases. And the other thing which we didn't mention today, because it's not part of the project, but it will come later. It will be announced at its own time. Is to the buildings and infrastructure that can accommodate people who will have to stay there at the borders on a full-time basis. The issue of bankable project, I think that question is to, yeah, madam, that's yours. Come and answer it. Whether the bank, what is that which you look at in financing when the DBSA say the project is bankable? That is above my pay grade. So.
Thank you, Minister. So I'll answer two questions. The question on the bankability, and I think there was also a question with regards to the project preparation funding. I think so. You can hear me, right? Yeah, thanks. So in terms of bankability, from a financing perspective, from a funder's perspective, was to walk through the journey and commenting on the RFP documents, the financial model that was presented, to ensure that when that project goes out to the market, the funders will be able to utilize it for their purposes. And as we continue into the RFP, is to walk the journey from a financing perspective with the department, ensuring that the DBSA will also be part of the observing team and the observation of the bid evaluations, and ensuring that at the end of the day, once the project has closed and the lenders and the bidders have returned their bids, the state gets value for money in terms of what they're obtaining from a project perspective versus the funding that we have to commit as the state. Thanks. So in terms of project preparation, I think through the some of the funds managed by the DBSA, this project was allocated about $1 million from the SADC project preparation fund for project preparation activities, which are all the enabling activities, some of which were used to pay the consultant to develop the project where it is. Some of the specialist studies that are required in terms of feasibilities, such as the economic studies that were required by the National Treasury, the traffic modeling studies, some work on the land, as well as the bulk infrastructure. Those are the activities that the funding is supporting. And I think from that funding so far, we've used more than 5 million. There's work that continues until you've reached financial close. There's always a preparatory work that goes behind the scenes to get the project to financial close and to be implemented. So we will continue to support that work. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the question we have all been waiting for, Kaya FM. How much? The answer is billions. I can't tell you more than that, because this is a request for proposals. We will know the amount when private sector have responded. In other words, you give them the design and what they need to be done. They are the ones who must tell us that for me to do this is how much it's going to cost. So you can't tell them, it's an examination. You can't give them the answers. You want the answers from them. So all I can tell you is that it's going to be a multi-billion rand project. The question of whether the borders will be put under pressure, I think we have already answered that one also during the construction, because we said it's going to be done in phases. We're not going to close a border and start constructing it. Normal movement will be going on while construction is still going on. I think these are all the questions here. Yes.
Taki, can you help us with the questions that you received on the online platform?
Thanks. Yeah, the first question is coming from Marvin Adams, who is a freelance journalist, and the question is, Minister, can you provide insights into the department's policies and guidelines regarding the use of terminology such as foreign national instead of undocumented, and how this choice of language may be contributing to the rise of xenophobia sentiments within our country. And
Just come again, let him read it again.
Please repeat the question from Marvin.
The question is, can you provide insights into the department's policies and guidelines regarding the use of terminology such as foreign national instead of undocumented, and how this choice of language may be contributing to the rise of xenophobia sentiments in our country?
Okay. The next one, thanks.
The next one is from Michelle Gomelo from Business Day, and the question is, can you give color on some of the procurement terms that will ensure localization is bolstered in the process of the upgrades? And the last question from Aisha, ENCA. Given the recent fire in Johannesburg, where several undocumented people were being housed, is the Minister of Home Affairs not concerned that a similar situation can arise in two Makis in Cape Town, where hundreds of refugees have been staying for over 3 years? And when will they be moved, and where will they be moved to? Thank you.
Okay. The two questions don't appear to be related to today's briefing, but but the Minister will respond to them. Over to you, Minister.
Yes, I don't think the questions have got anything to do with what we announced here, but nevertheless, I'm prepared to answer them. On this issue of terminology, I mean to say, because I'm hearing for the first time that a foreign national is also an undocumented person. That is not true. We've got many South Africans who are not documented. So to substitute documentation for illegality is wrong. And I'm not sure whether in English the word foreign is banned. I hear all the other countries using it. In fact, I'll even argue that worse than us, because countries have got ministries of foreign affairs, and they call them that. We are the only country that has got what we call DERCO. All other countries, if you check around the world, there's a Minister of Foreign Affairs. Is that xenophobic? Why is it xenophobic when it's used in South Africa? I've come to believe that it looks like the word xenophobia is now being invented for South Africa only. Any other country can do anything. If it's done in South Africa, it's xenophobia. So I'm not going to agree with you that we must replace the word foreign by undocumented. And I'm serious when I say there are still many South Africans which are not documented, because I work in Home Affairs. In fact, to give you an outline, on the African continent, when it comes to what is called CVRS, meaning Civil Registration and Vital Statistics, when you look at the continent, number one is Egypt. Their nationals are 98% documented. Number two is South Africa. Unfortunately, we are still at 89% documentation. The reason being that Egypt started putting Home Affairs offices in hospitals before us. We started in 2020, and the very month we started, we were stopped by COVID. But now we have restarted, and we believe we're going to cover. There are countries that are still at 5% documentation. Up until the beginning of this year, DRC was at 0% documentation. So I don't know whether all the people living in the DRC are going to be called by another name, because they are all undocumented. So I just want to challenge the person who asked this question about terminology, documentation, and xenophobia. It is the type of things that South Africa impose on themselves, which no other nation does. And I'm not going to be allowed to be put in that same pool of somehow finding ourselves as a country guilty for something that we are not guilty of. I reject that with the contempt it deserves. The issue of localization. I'm not sure whether transaction advisors can help with that one. Yes, yeah. Yeah, please. Any one of you, yeah.
Thank you. I think we all agree that localization is an industrial and socio-economic development policy of government. It finds expression in many instruments, statutory and policy. So in line with that, this procurement is fully giving effect to government socio-economic development policies and industrial policies. Understanding the various law reforms that are going on in the space, we have ensured that the regime that will apply to this procurement is consistent with the applicable legal requirements as a minimum. How that has been ensured is consistent with the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, is that the award or the selection of a successful bidder will ultimately, after it has been shown that their solution works, that is technically sound, will then go into what is often referred as Part C evaluation, which is a price and SED evaluation. And that will be evaluated on a 90-10 basis. That is, price will account for 90 points, and then SED will account for 10 points. But to maximize and ensure, Minister did speak about jobs, did speak about localization, to ensure that it delivers. In the agreement itself, PPP, which is out in the public as part of this RFP, is we have set out certain minimum thresholds which would expect any successful private party to commit to. When you see the RFP, you will see those numbers are consistent with everything government has said today, and none of are exclusionary, is make a proposal in line with those minimum thresholds, which are consistent with the applicable law. So that's how localization and local content will be achieved through this procurement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also forgot, before I go on this issue of undocumentation and xenophobia and using the word foreign, which is used all over the world, etc. I want to add onto this issue. There are people in this country who believe anybody who doesn't have any documents is the fault of Home Affairs. We're not doing our work. There are people who don't want to be documented. They exist because they know that they were not supposed to be here. Even for South Africans who are not documented, it's not all the time that is Home Affairs that is at fault, because there's no program in Home Affairs and there's no budget in which we go house to house to find out who's not documented. All the long queues we find in Home Affairs, people come on their own. The fact that we are putting Home Affairs offices in hospitals is that we have got a policy to document or give birth certificates 30 days after birth. Because if you do it after 30 days, it becomes complex. And I also want to add, because people were asking us how it came about, I gave you the figures today and the percentages, because they thought the issue of Thabo Bester is something that is out of this world. He was undocumented, yes, until he became 37 years. And it's because he was not going to any Home Affairs office to get documentation. His own mother only got documentation at the age of 36. That's not unusual for our continent, unfortunately. That's why many international bodies, including AU, WHO, etc., launch, and coincidentally it was launched in Durban in 2010, a project called CRVS, meaning Civil Registration and Vital Statistics. Because unfortunately, on this continent of Africa, there are people who are born, get married, and die without it being recorded anywhere whatsoever. So the figures I was giving you about EGB number 1, ASP number 2 on civil registration and vital statistics is exactly what is known even internationally about how far are we. So when people say no, somebody's undocumented, and if, because there are also people who believe that if everybody gets documented, all the problems of South Africa will come to an end. Will they? If everybody within these borders, regardless of where they come from, is documented, will the problem of housing, will the problem of jobs, will the problems of lack of accommodation, will the problems the economy is experiencing, will they come to an end? Obviously not. And lastly, does anybody accept me to call a Zamazama an undocumented person? It's an illegal person who came here to do illegality. And there is no way on earth that you'll ever want to be documented whatsoever. There's no Zamazama on earth. Unless you arrest him and subject them to certain things, you won't be. So I'm not prepared to call him, he's just an undocumented person. He's an illegal person. And if he comes from another country, he becomes an illegal migrant because he came specifically for that purpose of doing illegal things. And there is no way you'll be in touch with authorities. And I'm challenging anybody as I'm standing here. We have got 5 refugee reception centers in the country where people who come into our country as refugees and asylum seekers can go and register there. The first one is in Musina. The biggest one is here, a few meters from where I am, the Desmond Dusu Refugee Reception Center in Marabastad. The third one is in Cape Town. We've just opened a state-of-the-art facility there earlier this year. The fourth one is in Gqeberha, and the last one is in Thekwini. Anybody who appear there and announce themselves that I'm in South Africa will be documented, will be given a Section 24 permit. Whether they qualify for refugee status or not, that will be determined later. But the moment, just by the fact of showing themselves up there, they will be given a Section 22 permit, not 24. A Section 24 permit means you are now a bona fide refugee. But the Section 22 simply means you announce yourself and your presence here. And we give them that document, we won't refuse. Even if you are to take 1,000 people today to go to any one of our centers to announce themselves, they will be documented by way of a Section 22 permit. So I would like people in future to talk about what they know, not what they dream about. They have to know the facts, and then stand that they can talk. Then there's an issue of recent fire in Joburg. Can it not arise in Cape Town, in the tents there? It's a little bit of a long story, but I'll try to explain it in 5 minutes. You are aware that the people who are in those tents in Cape Town are people who invaded the Central Methodist Church in Cape Town and lived there for several months. And traders went to court to say that is disturbing their business. And the judge, I still remember, the presiding judge was Judge Tulare, who was then an acting judge as a magistrate. He's a full judge now. He's the one who made the stinging judgment against those people and said they must be moved and Home Affairs must process them in order to determine their status, which work we did very well and found that 85% of them actually have got documents. They've got the right to be in South Africa, but they don't have the right to be in that church anyway. Only 15% had no documents. And we started the process of demanding that they register for documents. Immediately after that, because the judge said they must move, instead of moving from the church to communities where they came from, they went to the central police station and surrounded it. While police were still deciding on what to do, COVID struck. And everybody who doesn't stay in a house or who has got no home to go to, you'll remember that they were moved from the streets. It didn't matter about your nationality. All people were moved to the streets, and we put tents all over. That was for COVID. And those tents were put for COVID and nothing else. But when COVID was announced, when it was announced that the state of disaster is no longer there, COVID is gone, they refused to move out. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees took over the problem. Together with the International Office on Migration, they gave them 3 offers. Number 1, that they reintegrate back in the communities where they came from. And when they do so, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees will pay for their accommodation for at least a period of 3 months while they are still settling. And number 2, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, will also buy them groceries and give them food and support them for 3 months while they are settling in. And number 3, that the International Office on Migration will buy those who want to go back home, will buy them tickets. And out of 1,600, about half of that took one of these offers. The rest refused because they said they want to go to Canada. I know in the media they are trying to deny that. Yes, they want to go to Canada. And we know why people are prepared to stake their lives in order to go to Canada. We know as a fact it's because in Canada there is a province called Quebec where it is French speaking, where the province is French speaking. And we know 85% of those people who are there in those tents are from DRC, where they speak French. And secondly, when the colonizers colonized Canada, they moved indigenous people away, and most of them were moved into Quebec. The Canadian government, in changing what they've done as colonizers, they've given very huge social benefit in Quebec. If you stay there as a foreign national or as a person who is regarded as indigent, you get huge social benefits. And that's what people are targeting for. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees wrote no less than 3 letters to inform them that what you are demanding cannot be done because it doesn't exist internationally. If you are in one country as a refugee, you want to go to the other, it's called a third country of resettlement. You apply, and there are rules under United Nations, and the rules are that country must go and register itself with United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and say, I'm available as a third country for resettlement. Any person who wants to come must apply to me. In January 2020, I went to Paris. I met the Deputy Minister of Immigration and Citizenship in Canada. I discussed this matter with her. She said, no ways. Nobody is going to come to my country because they are protesting in your country. Anybody who wants to come must apply as individuals, not even as a group. This information was given to them, and they kept on protesting. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees then sent ministers of religion. And I think that group, if I'm not mistaken, included Archbishop Thabo Makgoba. It also included Reverend Nissen, who was working for the South African Human Rights Commission, to inform them that what you are asking for, even the United Nations can't give it to you because it doesn't exist. They were assaulted. And I'm sure this is a matter of record. They were assaulted. Now, as I'm talking here in front of you, we need to evict them. But unfortunately, as Home Affairs, we are not landlords. The landlord is the Department of Public Works and the Cape Town Metro. And I must state here publicly that the Cape Town Metro is not cooperating with this issue. When you discuss with them, they tell you it's a Home Affairs problem. So we need to evict those people. But to evict them legally, we need eviction papers. And eviction papers are applied for. And we have asked the city many times, please apply for eviction because you own the land, not us. Because if we apply for eviction, we will go to court. The courts will question us about jurisdiction. So those who are interested on this matter, this is exactly what has happened. The communities, they are very unhappy. I won't be surprised if anything wrong happens there in terms of fires and all that. And what is more, they even destroyed the facilities that were there, ablution facilities, in order for us to look very bad. They even stopped their kids from going to school. And last week I was asking South African Human Rights Commission, this is against human rights for any parent to stop their child from going to school just to get sympathy and blame the South African government. And I demanded that the South African Human Rights Commission must act. They know about this problem, that there are kids who are sitting there who are going to school, many of them who were at school before, but they were deregistered in order to put up that protest. So we are still calling for the Cape Town Metro to apply for eviction orders. We are begging them because on our own there's nothing we can do. Unfortunately, this whole thing is taking us away from what we came here for. But I understand when media didn't come in the morning, I was saying maybe we should have announced that we're going to announce a big scandal. But when you talk development, people don't like it. Like these questions. We're talking here of a huge development for the economy of the country. And somebody chooses to ask about something that he believes is a scandal, xenophobia, undocumented and all that. I don't think this is fair for a country. I think South Africans must wake up and become South Africans and start appreciating what is being done for the country. Thank you very much.
All right. Colleagues, we're going to take another round of questions. Do we have questions from the floor? Okay. We don't appear to have questions. Tagi, do we have questions from the... Nothing? All right. No, we don't have any further questions. And with that, I think we have come to the...
Question, sorry.
Oh.
Just a quick one. I just wanted to find out, have there been
who's that?
interest?
Gatlego from the SABC.
Yeah, I just wanted to find out if there have been any companies, there have been interested parties already that have approached the department to say that, hey, we are ready to submit our proposals, and just give us an indication on that. And also, I know there was a question around localization, so maybe just give us also a breakdown of what would be the considerations for some of those companies that will be approaching the department and the stakeholders here to say that we are ready to submit our proposals to you. What would be some of the basic considerations that you'll be taking here or looking into where these companies are concerned?
Transaction advice? Yeah. Okay. Can you answer first? Localization. I'll take the last one. And then the first one, I'll take it last.
Thank you. On localization. So this is part of the bidding exercise. We have set the various thresholds. As a minimum, we're covering 7 elements. We have set a threshold for ownership. We have set a threshold for job creation in the local areas where each port is situated. We have set a threshold for manufacturing, or what is usually called local content, basically. We have set for management control of the respective participants in the bidding consortium, because as you know, the structure, as we said, it's a PPP. The structure may come in as a private party with at least 2 main subcontractors, a construction subcontractor, and operations and maintenance subcontractor. We have set thresholds that would apply to those. Because this will be an ongoing exercise, we have set threshold for preferential procurement and professional enterprise development. So we have all those elements as dictated as a minimum in the codes of good practice, because this is predominantly a construction-driven endeavor. So we've used the construction sector code as a shining light or as a guiding star on how you set those thresholds. Hence, I said the manner in which we have designed our socio-economic development regime for this procurement, bearing in mind the various litigation and other legal challenges, was to ensure that in order for this project to reach financial close, we must ensure that it is set at a level generally acceptable to the industry and generally acceptable to government. And as I say, these are minimum thresholds. We have created an allowance that you can go above the threshold. And that would ordinarily be incentivized in a procurement of this nature. But as we say, this is again a triple P. The more you incentivize it, the more it may become expensive, or the more you'll pay a premium. And therefore, we would have to consider the affordability question as required by the preferential procurement, the public-private partnership manual. So it's a whole balancing act, but the regime is an annexure to the draft triple P, which every potential bidder has access to and is able to design a proposal around clear criteria that we have set. Thank you.
Yeah, about whether any company has showed interest. The request for proposals were only released on Sunday in the Sunday papers. This is still the third day. But having said so, I want to tell you, this project did not start yesterday. This whole concept. It started long ago. When I arrived in Home Affairs, it was already so advanced that companies had already applied, they had already been shortlisted, they were about to appoint, and one just raised a big problem. That redeveloping 6 ports of entries in a multi-billion rand project, such a huge job, cannot be given to one company. It's very risky, and it doesn't spread the cake equally to many other companies, especially construction companies. So all those companies that participated in the first bid, we wrote to them to ask them if they will mind if we start all over again in order to redo this whole thing so that we distribute the wealth equitably. Fortunately, none of them were greedy. They agreed that there's nothing wrong, and it was started from the scratch. Now the new approach is that, talking under correction, is that no one company will be given 2 huge ports of entry simultaneously. If they have to give one company 2, it will be a huge one, a small one. There's no way that will say these 2 big ports of entry must belong to one company. As to how the transactional advisors are going to do it, we are leaving it to them. The second thing I want to tell you, we have also met trucking companies on this issue about whether if we come with this project, will they be prepared to pay, like in the toll gates? I'm sure you are aware. I was expecting this question, it never came, but I'm not provoking it. On how this whole transaction will be paid for, because it's a PPP. The private company that will build, how are they going to be reimbursed? Even if you didn't ask it, there are 2 ways of doing it, and we'll choose one of them. I don't know the others, but I happen to know N1 from here to Polokwane because I know it. That part from Kranskop in Kranskop in what's that municipality used to be called Nelstrom? Mudimulile. Yeah, starting from Kranskop in Mudimulile to Polokwane, right up to Musina, if I'm not mistaken. That road was done by 5 huge construction companies, and for 20 years they were given it was a concessionaire. They were collecting the tolls for 20 years before transferring it back to the state. If I'm not mistaken, the period has just been extended. So it's one of the things we'll do. Now I'm telling you this story because trucking companies said we are prepared to pay, even if you say one movement across the border is 1,000 rand, we'll pay it, because they said the logic is simply business. That paying 1,000 rand and going past is better than spending many hours and days queuing at the border. So they said, whatever we charge us will be ready as private trucking companies because our business doesn't move very well. So they support this project wholeheartedly. So my simple answer to you in long words is that we expect an interest from many companies because they've already shown that interest before. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister.
To add, while we still have the Minister there, just one last question. Have we identified risks going into this project, and are you able to share with us some of those risks that you identified?
The Minister has already left. You are saying why?
But that's what I am.
No, yeah, no. The issue of risk is why we have got all these skilled people here. The transactional advisors, the DBSs of this world, Ernst Young, Bowmans, Gilfillan. That's why we have got them on our side. And we believe we have got very good partners who must look at the project and tell you that this one is risky, take this one, not that one, etc., etc. And I'm not sure yet whether they've already identified those risks or whether any one of them is ready to answer about what they've identified. But I'm leaving it to them. If they are ready, any one of them can do so. But it's not us in Home Affairs who have got that type of skill and capacity. I don't know, Commissioner. Floor is Bowmans, Gilfillan. Yes. Okay. Yes.
I'm not going to really tabulate the specific risks. As you would know, that under the PPP, one of the things you do, you undertake a feasibility study to determine whether the project is feasible. In the feasibility study, you do a lot of risk assessment and produce a risk register. And the risk register changes over a period of time as you go about to resolve risks. So we may have started with a lot of risks, but we identify mitigation measures and we moved and changed those mitigation measures. So we haven't really identified any fatal risk that would make the project not go ahead. And you'd remember earlier, I think Nell did mention that part of what we are doing in this exercise is to ensure a fair allocation of risk among parties, because that's what the PPP manual requires. Says a successful PPP must reside in value for money for government and must transfer as much risk and operational risk to the private sector party. Hence, you've got that big contract that you draft over a long period of time that allocates those risks. So the risk are really that we have come across in this transaction are typical risks you'd kind of get into this kind of things. They are things like land availability for construction, permitting approvals, all of which when you go to the RFP, you will see that there is a very clear program of procuring those, and progress has been made. And other risks that you'd always encounter here is non-performance by the private sector party, and there is a clear regime on how you penalize a non-performing private sector party. You heard here, Nell, when I was outlining the timetable, that we have given quite a fair long period of time to get to bid response in March 2024. It's because we're aware of one single risk, that in order for us to select a successful bidder, their bid proposal must be fully funded. In order for you to do that, you must engage with financiers and all of that, and that requires time. So we've allowed that long period to ensure that we don't have a procurement failure. We have fully funded procurement or bid proposal when we get to that. So in essence is no fatal risk have been identified. We identify one can really term as vanilla risk, for which we have proposed several mitigation measures to ensure a successful procurement. Thank you.
Yeah, I just thought I need to explain this because the issue of land was mentioned. The land around our ports of entry is owned by two entities, the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure and the Department of Agriculture, Land and Rural Development. As I'm speaking in front of you, the two entities have already officially transferred that land to the Border Management Authority. It's no longer vesting in the Department of Land Affairs or public works. It's now the BMA has taken ownership. The part that is still being worked on is additional land that is owned by the private sector companies around any of our ports of entry. That negotiation is ongoing. We don't really want to develop it as a risk, because we don't see any private sector company stopping such a big development from taking place simply because they own the piece of land there. Of course, if they do that, this whole project is in the public interest, not only for South Africa, even for our neighbors. So if anybody refuses, you might even have to expropriate. Yes, we'll definitely do so, because we can't allow anybody to hold many countries at ransom just because they own a small piece of land. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister and DM and the colleagues. I think that we have come to the end of the briefing. There are no further questions, and with that, I would like to thank you once again for coming. Just to indicate that the next step in terms of what Minister has announced is that on the 23rd of September, there will be 27th of September, there will be a technical briefing to the bidders, and I'm sure, Minister, we will be keeping the public informed at the appropriate time. All right. With that, thank you very much again. We have come to the close of the briefing. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, if there are people who still have got questions, they are free to send those to me, David, and also Takalani. We will be addressing those offline. Thank you very much. One-on-one.